For those of you who don't know about WheresSpot, for going on, I can't believe it, 25 years, WheresSpot has been a trusted resource for people at the intersection of advertising and production. Our superpower is like if you need, even here at 5 o'clock, if you need a gaffer tomorrow in Des Moines because your gaffer got COVID or whatever, well, this is the place where you will find more than one. You'll find many great ones. So we're a place where people connect. We also like sharing news, information. My trusted partners here are Jonathan Shipman on this with us, Michael Porte, who sadly could not be with us. He's got a family situation that just happened to collide with this. That is more important. There are things more important than work. We all better know. So he might sneak in here, but for the moment, he's with us in absentia. And he refuses to be named, but there's a man named Ed Marzak who helps us so much with technology, etc. And he's lurking here somewhere. He's shy. Moving on to our esteemed. Oh, first let me talk about the event today and how we got here. So again, WheresSpot once in a while goes outside of its normal thing, and Jonathan, who's with us here, perhaps you can see him, he was inspired to write a little blog post about his personal experience with DEI. Jonathan, again, was head of production at McCann, and in this blog post, which you could find at WheresSpot.com, he reflected on his own personal experience and how the opportunities he had, and they were few, to work with underrepresented directors, etc. And he was reflecting in this post on how things have changed somewhat and how inspiring, not the word he used, but that is to him. So he posted that, and again, all credit to Jonathan. He inspired this idea. So here we are. That's that. Moving on to our esteemed panelists. And let's see, I don't know if we can see him at this moment or not, but it's not important. TAMIKA, LAMISON, is Executive Director of the Commercial Directors Diversity Program. Many of you know or should know of it, an inclusion program for historically underrepresented directors interested in commercial directing, created during negotiations between the AICP and the DGA. She also has a company, Maktub Media, focusing on creating unique content and supporting emerging and seasoned filmmakers. Also works as a development exec and independent producer, specializing in projects with a social, political, or human interest angle. Last but definitely not least, I love this. She founded a 501c3 nonprofit organization called Make a Film Foundation that grants film wishes to children who have serious or life-threatening medical conditions by teaming them with film industry professionals who help them to create short film legacies. Amazing, right? Beautiful. Thank you for that. Makeafilmfoundation.org. We have Wendy STRYKER, a partner at esteemed Frankfurt, Kurnit, Klein, and Selz, PC. Wendy focuses on employment law issues for creative industries and modern workplaces, listed in super lawyers in the employment and labor category for 4 consecutive years. She represents many top marketing services, agencies, media, and entertainment companies, tech startups, and other corporations, as well as not-for-profit corporations and executives. In addition to handling all aspects of employment litigation, including discrimination, harassment, classification, she helps clients manage litigation risk through expert guidance and the design and implementation of compliance and training programs. In addition to her employment practice, her litigation experience includes advertising, trademark, and copyright, entertainment, First Amendment, and general commercial litigation matters. So we could ask her about AI also when we're done. Finally, but very importantly, Wendy is a board member and a board chair of the New York Civil Liberties Union. So good on you for that, Wendy. Finally, Sallie Morris. Sallie is a creative talent and operations consultant after many rewarding years doing her part to turn McCann into a creative powerhouse. She is now available to help new leaders overcome anything standing in the way of their agency's success. Career highlights include the 1,000 or so creative people she hired and the career she helped steer. Sallie launched a global collective for female creatives and has made DEI a centerpiece of everything and trained others to do the same. She has staffed countless award-winning campaigns, discovered juniors who are now running agencies, paired art directors with copywriters, creating lifelong partnerships, made a million friends, and most importantly, treated people with kindness and respect, and still does. What a great group. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, let's get started. I thought it'd be a good idea to just start with the legal landscape. So Wendy, let's start with you. Please, an overview of relevant law, what I call asks for talent. For example, what in general is allowed, not allowed in the context of, as we see on WheresSpot, a post looking for a director for a project. Is there one set of rules for race, another for LGBT, another for neurodiversity? Are there different rules depending on the size of the business? Can a small company do something a larger company can't? Get us started, Wendy.
All right. I mean, I think that the laws that we want to focus on here are what we call the anti-discrimination laws, right? I mean, these are the laws in general that say no discrimination in hiring or in the other terms and conditions of employment, meaning anything having to do with work on the basis of somebody's protected class. All right, so there are a number of different laws, related to this. We've got federal laws, we have state laws, and some places we have city laws that all broadly cover this topic. And they are going to vary depending on where you are, right? The federal laws are going to cover everybody, and depending on what state or city you're in, you'll be covered by those laws too. All right, do they apply to everybody depending on size? The answer is no. All right. The federal laws, and these are the laws that are going to cover. We call Title VII, the Americans with Disabilities Act. These generally apply to companies that employ 15 or more people. All right. So if you employ fewer folks than that, these laws may not apply. But keep in mind, there's always going to be an applicable state law, and in some places a city law. So here I'm sitting in New York. For example, here in New York, our New York State human rights law applies to employers of one or more employees. So in other words, every employer in New York State is going to be covered by the New York anti-discrimination laws. And we have a New York City law that covers employers of 4 or more, unless we're talking about sexual harassment, and then everybody's covered. So you asked about law, are there some laws for race? Are there other laws for sexual orientation? Again, yes and no, right? I mean, it depends on the law we're talking about. All of these laws prohibit discrimination on the basis of a protected class. All right. So, for example, Title VII, no discriminating in employment on the basis of race, color, religion. I don't have them all here. Sex, which means gender and other aspects of gender. And we have to think of gender more broadly than just being male or female. This covers gender expression, gender identity, the status of being transgender. And then we have the state laws that are never going to be more restrictive. They're only going to cover more. So many state laws add additional protected categories, like here in New York. We add, in addition to race, color, religion, disability, national origin, sex, sexual orientation. Here in New York, we add things like military status, Age is covered under both. New York also covers things like marital status, domestic violence victim status, arrest and conviction records. And under the city law, we sometimes add even more. Like this may be news to folks. Starting May of last year, New York City added height and weight as a protected category. So no discriminating in hiring based on height or weight anymore in New York City.
Follow-up question for you then. Let's say, because what we see on WheresSpot and what we see in the world, we see cases where agency, it might be a request coming from the client. They have an interest in using a person of color, let's say, for a particular project, because somebody has decided, creative director, client, whatever, that would be a good choice for that project. Maybe the subject involves people in that class, and in their minds, this is the right thing to do. So there's a way to ask for that, right? That's legal, or how would you think about that if you were an agency producer charged with, satisfying that request? Sounds like you can't be explicit, but how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting where the intersection of the anti-discrimination law hits with, the goals of a DEI program, right? On the one hand, we want to encourage diverse hiring, and on the other hand, the law tells us no discriminating based on race, and that works both ways, right? No making employment decisions solely based on things like race or gender or disability. So the way I normally see that playing out, and look, and I think over the past years, we've seen people pushing the envelope on this, all in the aim of good goals. And now we see some pushback following the recent Supreme Court cases that I know we might want to talk about. But what I kind of always told people who wanted to, encourage diversity in hiring is that you just want to be careful about not saying, we will only be hiring based on a particular category, right? We can encourage, people of color encouraged to apply, diverse pipeline encouraged.
Right.
But you just want to be very careful never to explicitly state in any kind of announcement, we are only looking to hire somebody of a particular class. But we can certainly encourage all people to apply, or we can even particularly encourage some people to apply.
Right.
Yeah,
TAMIKA, you have a thought? Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh on that. Yes, I that's exactly the language that we use as well, encourage. But I would also say one way to look at it is someone who has visceral experience with something. I mean, if you're working on a medical show, you want to, a lot of times showrunners or people like that, I'm just saying, using this as an example, you want someone who has that specific experience. I mean, if you have, you might want someone who viscerally understands what this cultural thing is, or what, whatever it is. And I'm just saying that's another way to look at it. Someone with visceral experience, or that background, because it's very, you want someone to bring some sort of authenticity to it. That's not to say that we can't all create whatever. Of course we can. But, also keeping in mind, just to have something really authentic, you might want to, bring someone with that background in from that perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well
speaking
said.
of DEI, go ahead. Speaking of DEI,
Yeah, I would
generally,
add to that. You can't just, the way your organization works is somebody needs a crew member at the last minute, and then you got to jump on it, right? So what you want to do is you want to build credibility with the audience that you're trying to attract for the future. You can't just all of a sudden appear on the scene and saying, hey, I want somebody who's diverse. I want somebody who's Black to be my gaffer on this crew. You have to work very hard to create a reputation for yourself and for your production company, where somebody who is not of the majority would feel comfortable, and they know they're going to walk into a situation where they're going to be a valued member of the crew.
Right.
That takes time. That takes time.
Yeah.
It takes intention. It takes somebody who really cares, or a number of people who really care in your production company or in your organization per se, that says, hey, we want to welcome you. We want to know who you are out there. We want to have you part of our clique. And I think that that is something that people miss along the way, that this can be a very exclusive business, very inclusive business.
Sally, your
perspective,
your perspective, I hear the agency perspective, which I appreciate and I agree with. I think the difficulty on our side, the vendor side, so much of it is so reactive and, just geared.
Right, but you would know the names. You have to build up your Rolodex, if I can use a word from the last century. You have to build up your Rolodex and your relation. This is a relationship business that we're in. So you want to build up your credibility with individual people out there who you can call, and they may not be the end person that you hire, but they may know somebody, or they may know 12 people that you can add to your roster. So you don't want to do it in a moment of an emergency. You want to do this, you want to build it up over time, and you want to be welcoming.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that, really for the group. Do you feel there are keys to helping inclusive hires to be successful? In other words, are there things to keep in mind, in the workplace to help inclusive hires? I'd love anyone or all of you to speak to that.
Well, I'll jump in with just saying, I mean, one of the most important things is creating a safe work environment. There has to be a safe space. And there is a lot of different ways to do that. And I think there's been many, some haven't been great. I would love to hear some other experiences with ways that people have tried to do that. But I think that it's creating a safe space. I mean, there are legal ways to do it. You can, there has to be some sort of HR situation where a person can actually know that there's some accountability if something happens, that there's someone they can talk to. So that's one way, because there are a lot of situations where that is not the case, and there's no one to confide in or speak to if something is amiss. I think there needs to be developed a open communication. That's part of what I think you created this conversation. There's a lot of sensitivity involved. So how do you have an authentic conversation about things and not feel like you're going to be, and this is for everyone, punished or not heard, right? No matter what your perspective is. I don't know if that makes
that is helpful.
My visceral response is safe space.
But it's interesting when you talk about, HR. I mean, again, in the context of smaller production companies, like that's not happening. So, it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah. You may be on a crew for a day or two and then never see those people again. So, but while that person is there, you want them to feel comfortable. And you want them to have somebody that they can go to if there is a situation, because you don't want that situation to turn into a major fire, right? So there should be somebody within the production company that is designated as the person that they can come to if they don't feel comfortable in a situation. And this goes for all kinds of diversity. It's not just the skin color thing. Women have felt that way. People who are short feel that way. People who are overweight may feel that way. You have a lot of neurodiversity as well that
Right.
people are much more aware of now. So I think it benefits everybody. It's not just,
Interesting.
For certain
Interesting.
groups. And, a lot of it is training the people that you work with too, making sure that at least the core group of that production company understands the basic tenets of running a company that understands differences and the way to approach people in general. I really think that that's an important cornerstone of any production company who wants to open the doors to a more diverse workforce, even if it's a temporary workforce.
Interesting.
I think this is also part of why sexual harassment training, which is mandatory in a lot of states now, and I think, even if you're in a state where it's not, it's very important, when starting a production to do it. It's referred more to as respect in the workplace training now. And that's because the emphasis is not just on sexual harassment, but it's on the understanding that harassment can be, perpetrated a lot of different ways, right? You can have harassment based on race, harassment based on religion or age. So part of the training is helping people understand that that is part of what we're talking about, that it's wrong, how to recognize it, what it looks like, what supervisors should do if they see it or learn about it, and also emphasize to people that it's very important if these things happen that you talk to someone, because it's easier to solve problems when they're small than wait until there's, a great big, ring the HR bell and the lawyers come running in moment.
Interesting.
It's really about
And
this
it's a
very
lot
early
less
understanding.
expensive to do that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I would be shocked. This all makes so much sense in the context of a longer project, a show, a movie. I'd be shocked if the production managers and first ADs were not having those conversations, on day one. Again, and it's interesting because of the nature of commercials. I wonder if anybody's taking the time to have those conversations. I want to step back generally to DEI and SALLIE, something that came up when we were speaking with you, and although you could all speak to it. In a recent article in the Times, journalist Sarah Kessler wrote, in 2020, companies hired DEI officers in droves amid a racial reckoning after the murder of George Floyd. Recently, DEI programs have become less visible. Over the past 2 years, hiring for DEI roles has plunged, and the number of investor calls mentioning DEI has dropped. Do you agree with that statement? And if so, why do you think DEI has taken such a big hit? And
What time are you going?
I think it's irrefutable that that's happened. It's not up for discussion. It's definitely happened. And I don't think it's because we've solved the problem, so they're no longer needed. I think what has happened is because conservative lawmakers have said that they don't want to have DEI taught in schools. They don't want it to be a deciding factor in college or university admissions, those sorts of things. It's kind of given big corporations who are always trying to cut costs, even if they're making billions and billions of dollars, they're always looking to cut costs. It's an easy thing to say, oh, we need to cut $1 million, we'll cut the DEI department. And, the whole reason, DE&I is not something that big corporations are doing because they're, they love people and it's a kumbaya thing. They're doing it because they feel they need to. And the minute they don't feel that pressure, whether it's because of Supreme Court decisions or their own clients, they pull back. And that is what I think we're seeing right now.
Right. And Wendy, this relates probably also to what came up when we were first talking about how last year's big Supreme Court case against affirmative action, even though it's only about that, is rippling out and to other areas.
Right. I mean, it has, I think that it has been, you know, amongst other things like the, you know, some of these other state laws we were talking about. But, you know, whereas students for fair admissions cases were specifically in the context of education, right? I mean, what did they say? They said that, you know, that colleges or universities with the goal of achieving a diverse student body can no longer justify using race as a plus factor in college admissions, which they were allowed to do before, because it violates the Equal Protection Clause and Title VI, none of which apply to private employers, right?
Okay.
It was no using race plus. But there's been a downstream effect, right? Which is that, you know, a lot of the conservative groups that kind of pushed these lawsuits are now starting to kind of hone in particular on DEI programs. You know, I mean, I think that we saw DEI programs when you start from the premise that, you know, race is not supposed to be used as like, you know, a factor in decision making, you know, specifically when it comes to who to hire or, you know, who to promote or how much to pay people. There was a lot of good work that could be done in the DEI context and that was being done, you know, without saying, you know, that we can set quotas, we're only going to hire women, you know, but we also saw programs start to push the envelope, and that's what's being targeted right now. So we've seen lawsuits against companies and law firms that had internship programs that were specifically targeted at, you know, internships or jobs only for underrepresented folks. You know, even some companies that were providing grants specifically for groups. The Fearless Fund got sued for their grant making. So it's really, there's been a little bit of a chill, I think, on, you know, employers that are trying to be conservative or that don't want to be targeted and sued on, you know, how far are we going to push our DEI programs? Yeah, I think that's something that we're going to see and that we're going to continue to see for a while.
Relevant to us, I didn't even know this.
That's
Tamika,
crazy.
you know,
Hold on, we're listening.
sorry.
Uh-oh.
I didn't
Because I
realize
can't
the AICP is actually involved in litigation right now about the program that they have. This is I don't know too much about the details, but yeah, it's kind of startling to learn that because I don't know, I didn't have that on my bingo card. And
Well, I just wanted to say that when all of the George Floyd thing happened and a lot of companies, you know, were creating diversity programs or trying or putting out messages and all of that, I think there was a general, at least from the people that I know in my community, we felt like there would probably, I don't know how, there's no other way to say it than we didn't really trust it. I mean, you know, and we felt like that, you know, and I'm, you know, I hate to speak for the general we, but I'm really just talking about the people in my specific community that I spoke to, and, you know, we were talking about it. It seemed really wonderful that people were understanding some of what historically underrepresented communities had been going through, and we're having some empathy for it and sympathy, and but you know, we felt like there was always a diversity fatigue that would come into play, and we literally were taking bets on, well, is it going to be a year, 2 years? I don't know. How long is it going to be before okay, you know, we've given you your time and now back to the way it was. And so, you know, it was a bit disappointing to see a lot of the programs kind of either fall to the wayside or be targeted or not be supported in a way that was healthy, you know, or be defunded or whatever it was, right? Super disappointing because a lot of those programs I saw launch careers. They were actually solving problems. And I think what a lot of people have come to understand is that it's good business. It's not about, you're not giving
Exactly.
somebody, it's good business to hire diverse clientele. And I would really like to sort of disavow the thought that people are being hired who are not capable or are not the best person, because in my experience, in order to be hired, you have to be so much better. Like, honestly, one of the things that people in historically underrepresented people that I know talk about is that, it'll be great when we could be hired with the same credentials as just an average other person. But no, we're never hired. We can't be average. We have to be way more than average, like
Interesting.
excellent, in order to get a certain kind of job. Now, aside from that, having the resources and the support to simply just learn. I mean, you have to be allowed to make mistakes. You have to be allowed to make mistakes, to grow and to learn in order to get better. And so historically underrepresented people have to have that experience as well. There's so many things to unpack. I'll just put that out there.
Right. No,
Weigh
appreciate
in.
it. So,
Oh, it's very
again,
true. I mean,
go ahead.
let me just say that, the lowering the standards is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is when you go out and look for people, you just have to search in a larger pool than you're used to. And that's the intentional part, because talent, pure talent, is evenly distributed. We all have the same genes and traits and all that other stuff, evenly distributed by race. But opportunity is not evenly distributed. And I think that's the difference, the difference that I want to point out. It's the opportunity that we need to change. It's not the people that we need to change. So larger pool to give more people the opportunity to show you what they've got. And that's why when I started, I talked about creating credibility in this space. Like TAMIKA was saying, there has to be that sense of trust that you're going to go to this place and you're going to have a positive experience, because, talented people can write their own ticket. There are not that many talented people out there, so they can go anywhere. So if you want the creme de la creme of any group, you have to make sure you treat them right when you're working with them. So I think that's really important too. And there are also a lot of organizations that people can tap into. That it's kind of scary to say, okay, where is that pool? So, if you go about recruiting people in the same way, since I know a lot about recruiting, if you go about recruiting people fishing in the same pond all the time, you're not all of a sudden going to find new people. So you have to say, okay, are there organizations like, let's say, and I don't know if anybody is familiar with streetlights.org. They're an organization in LA. They serve the film community, and they teach young people from underserved communities the technical aspects of working on a set, a host of different kinds of jobs. And then they give them jobs. There are certain corporations and production company, big production companies, Hollywood, that say, okay, we want to make sure that every production we're going to have X number of people, and they rely on streetlights. So that organization's been around 20 years. So you can imagine they've developed quite a pool of people. So you can tap into that. You can also tap into directors who themselves are diverse, like a Spike Lee, for example. When he started 40 Acres and a Mule, he was training people himself because he wanted a diverse workforce, because he wanted their lived experience to end up on the screen. It's not just about actors, it's about everybody that participates in the production. So find out who's been working for Spike Lee. Those are the kinds of new ways of going about finding people that will work. If you just go the usual route, you're going to end up in the same place.
Yeah,
Yes.
the number of resources is impressive. I thought I knew most or many of them because I've discovered, Black female directors websites and on and on. And I happen to be, just further preparing for today, I happen to be on the AICP site. And if you drill down there to resources, I mean, I'm just reading off the screen now, Black composers, Black in Post, Brown Girls Doc Mafia, on and on, diverse creatives, Ghetto Film School, on and
Yeah,
on.
that's a good one too.
Yeah, so, right, if you
Yeah.
put the work in, you can find stuff. And it's really, there's no excuse if your commitment is there, even as a small company. That's a good note. Let's see. So in terms of, I had this note about navigating potential conflicts and biases within the workplace. I come back to what was said previously. It's about, right, safety and having a culture where communicating about these things is welcomed, right?
Yes. And I'm not I feel like creating the safe space, I have felt like it was getting better, and then I'm not sure that it started to grow. Maybe it tabled out, but being able to say things that are uncomfortable and still everyone being okay with it, like, being able to say how you feel and not having that follow you, sorry. Not have that follow your work environment. You can still work with people, be professional, still, collaborate, even though you've expressed something that was uncomfortable for someone to hear. You have to be able to have those conversations and be with them, be with those conversations and still work and respect people.
Right, right. Here's something very specific that's sort of on the legal and edge, but it's also about maybe the sign of the times we were talking about earlier. An agency producer asked us to ask you, quote, "We love getting D&I reports after our productions, but we've recently started getting this legal pushback. How can we move forward with championing underrepresented talent without asking for them?" So what's the thing with D&I reports? I don't really see that in my world. Is that something people were asking for and then now specifically not wanting because of this new environment based on the court case? Anybody have a thought? Reports
I'll give
about
that to Wendy. I
staffing
think
on
what you're
jobs?
saying is,
Yeah, I'm not sure I
I think,
understand.
yeah. So what happened a couple of years ago is they purposely asked people who are on the set to self-identify what their race is, race, ethnicity, all that stuff, because they wanted to gather data
Yeah.
on how diverse crews are, because this is such a fluid kind of thing. It's not like you have employees, it's in and out, and you could work for 50 different production companies in the course of a year. So they ask people to self-identify, and they want to report that to, in TV commercials, they want to report that to the client so that the client who has, their vendors of other organizations and companies who have diversity goals. And part of their diversity goals is that their vendors trickle those diversity goals down to their vendors. So that was what the impetus was for this.
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was pushback now, but that's news to me. But that was the reasoning.
Yeah. So it's a nice idea for a progressive client to want accountability on this issue. And it's
Right.
unfortunate if there's pushback in the space.
What was the basis for the pushback? I mean, I know that when I talked to a lot of folks, you know, over the past few years about data gathering.
Yes.
And, you know, legally, the answer was always like, you know, of course you can, but, you know, it needs to be voluntary and you should disclose what you're going to do with it. And the goals here are excellent, right? I mean, it's about accountability, it's about improvement, it's about tracking. You know, the downside for companies doing it is that, you know, you're tracking your failures as well as your successes. And I think that a little bit like at least what the schools are worried about now, the universities are, you know, now that they're being targeted by these conservative groups, if their statistics look the same as they did before, are they going to be, you know, found to still be doing things they're not supposed to? So I think that the data tracking can work both ways, but there's nothing inherently illegal or wrong. And, you know, what it was being used for was accountability to show that through legal and permissible ways, you know, these goals of DEI were being met.
Right.
I mean, I think that the things that are being targeted now are not so much that we still think diversity is important and we're still working to improve it, whether it's by working extra hard to make sure you're looking at different sources and you're finding different people to consider. You know, it's about specifically singling people out, right? I mean, some of the things that are being targeted were, you know, financial rewards for companies who do more diverse hiring and meet quotas.
Okay.
But you know, but actually doing better and tracking that you're doing better isn't inherently wrong. I mean,
Right.
it's actually good.
Interesting. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Here's a question from a WheresSpot member that's interesting and not about legal. It's about something else. What can we do to get clients to be more on board with diverse casting and representation? Quote, I've received a lot of pushback to diversity over the years with the excuse being that their demographics are middle-class white folks, and anything other than that is not representative for their brand. How do we combat that? I mean, I can't think of an example where that would, in a way, make sense to me, unless you're, you know, selling MAGA caps or something. But what was that? Anybody have a reaction to that?
I laughed. I thought it was funny.
It does happen a lot. I really feel for casting people because it does happen a lot. You know, the big corporation has these goals, right? But it doesn't trickle down to that brand manager that you're dealing with on that particular production. And it's very frustrating for the agency and for the casting people and the
Yes.
production company, because they're just wrong. I think you can gently say, hey, I saw on your website, client, that
Right.
you know, you're a big supporter of more diverse communities. And this product wouldn't appeal just to white people. It would appeal to all kinds. Everybody needs a battery.
Yes,
you know.
course.
So
of course.
I think you have to handle it deftly because that's your client. But on the other hand, showing a more representative cohort of what America looks like can't hurt. Nobody's going to not buy your product because you have somebody that's not white in the spot. And I think you got to mix it up, and you know, you have to tell your clients, hey, this is going to be more visually arresting for you. People are going to look twice. It's not going to be as bland as every other commercial. You're going to stand out and get noticed more. So the things that you have to say have to appeal to that person who's standing in your way. You can't say things that they're not going to care about.
Right.
You have to figure, you have to be strategic, you know?
Yes. But
Well,
I have an
just wanna-
expression.
can I just say one quick
Go
thing
ahead,
about that?
please.
So Sally, I definitely agree with you. And I feel that just the truth about, you know, what you said, it's a very, you know, do you want to make money? Do you want to appeal to everybody? I mean, that's really what I think is the game changer usually when you speak to the, you know, this is how you're going to make more money and appeal to more people. I mean, look at the world. This is this is what the world looks like. This is who the consumers are. So if you provide, and also, you know, just bringing more people into that pool and letting them, you know, have that opportunity. Again, back to what you said, Sally, opportunity and access that is the main ingredient to really have things shift and change. Even when it comes to auditions, sometimes somebody comes into the room that you just didn't think about. You had an idea of what you thought that person was going to be or look like, but then someone comes in, you go, wow, that completely opened up my perspective of what it should be. Even when we talk about gender, you know, a lot of times, oh, it's for a doctor, and you know, somebody might think it's got to be a male or whatever it is, and then you come in, you hire, you have women in that, or, you know, yeah, you get
Yeah,
where I'm going.
it's the famous, you know, the famous advertising construct of disruption, right? The shy idea of disruption. If you disrupt, you're going to get noticed. So if you say, well, you know, white people, they're our main core audience, and then you change it up in your commercial, people are going to do like a little bit of a head spin, and then they're going to pay attention. And I also think that people on the client side are very data driven. So the more data you can have in your hip pocket to prove your point, the better. You can't just say like, well, it would be nice, and you know, that kind of thing. Data, because they live and die on data.
I have an expression. I say, clients get the advertising they deserve. Those that are bold, right, and are willing to really roll the dice can get great work, and people that are scared and, you know, nervous about taking chances get lesser work.
I've seen some casting recently, and I'm on the agency side of it, and that have kind of really set me back a little bit in terms of what clients look for based on targeted advertising. And when you look at a spectrum in terms of color preference, when you go from saying, I want to hire a person from Honeytone to Blackberries, let's say. So, and then they put images with the skin tones that they want to cast for. I was so repulsed by this that I did bring it to the attention of my account manager, but nobody wanted to speak back to this big box client. And I understand that, but it's sometimes, you know, it's like, as an agency, you have to be respected for what you do and that you're going to do right by them. But for them to blatantly give them a casting deck that had women from Halle Berry to Viola Davis that they wanted to cast for a particular commercial.
Right.
Well,
Excuse me, 1 second. I'll be right back. I have to get my cord for my computer's about to die. Let me fit.
So good. You're excused.
Hey, Perry.
Can't have that.
Can I just make
I hear casting things where we want a Black person that sounds white.
Okay.
And so these are clients requesting this from their agencies in terms of shooting commercials. So you're looking at it from a production perspective. I look at it from an agency perspective. And when this crosses my desk, I mean, how do you think I feel as a Black woman in this industry? You know, who's been in this industry for over 30-something years, and the challenges that I had to face as a Black woman, you know, pushing myself, you know, through all kinds of hurdles to get to where I am today. But DE&I, unfortunately, since George Floyd, has really taken a dip. But how do we bring it back?
Well, can I just say a couple of things, Perry?
Sure,
First,
please.
we should have said this up front. We're actually not taking questions from the audience. We've asked everybody to mute themselves. We took questions ahead of time. We really wanted to focus on the speakers. And so if people could please adhere to that.
Yeah,
Great.
it's a rich subject, and we could talk about it from so many perspectives for so long, and it's so important. So yeah. Okay, so going back to this question that I referenced earlier on, we often hear, why not just hire the best, no matter their background? What's the response to that? Is it,
Agree.
is that you, Tamika?
No, that was me. I think you
Just
should
hire the
hire the
best.
best.
Right. But then that begs the question.
There's an inherent problem with saying that, which is that if you reach out to other communities, they're not the best.
Yeah, there's a lot
Okay.
of assumptions about what the best is. And quite frankly, I mean, many times, let's completely take historically underrepresented communities out. Many times the best is still not hired. That doesn't, I mean, people hire people and give them opportunities because they like them, because they know them, because somebody, because they're related to them. There are so many situations in which the best is not who's hired. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't hire the best. I'm saying that if we use that as a meter, that is a stick, then we should do that universally, which is not what happens. And
Right.
and quite frankly, that's why some of the, just to go outside of this particular community, some of the Harvards and the Yales and the those schools are getting pushed back because they're like, wait, hold up, what you're saying doesn't make any sense, because that D-level student whose dad paid $100,000 a year is, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just, that's a
Right.
small
Right.
anecdote. but-
CC Jared Kushner. That just was, I just saw that
Right.
reported yet again.
Well,
How,
Yeah.
but also, what are the criteria you're using to determine the best? And, do those criteria already have baked in biased assumptions? I think I'm doing a you said you wanted to mention AI, about an AI one of the big tech companies had an AI program that scanned resumes for hiring, and they based it on, they'd scanned their 10 years of most successful hires and plucked those criteria to scan resumes. But the past 10 years of tech hires had been disproportionately men. So, the AI that technically can't discriminate was, using baked in criteria based on historical bias. So I think
Interesting.
that when we're talking about hiring the best, let's think about what that means, and are we bringing forward, assumptions that we shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, yes, who's determining the best? And there's so many amazing, your pool just needs to be expanded. And then your idea of, I think that can be dispelled once the pool is expanded, because I think that even happened quite with CDDP. There was some concern about, would we have enough candidates who were excellent to actually choose from, right? And I was like, we're going to have way more than enough candidates to choose from. We're going to have a hard time choosing these amazingly talented directors because there's so many out there, and they've just been doing their own thing, trying to find independent ways to create because they have not had the access or the opportunity. And that has proven true every year. Our judges are basically, fighting and arguing for the people that they want in the program, because there's we get to choose 5, and there's so many talented people. So, I mean,
And you got to
Interesting.
check your prejudice when you're developing what your criteria is too. For example, when I was on the agency side doing hiring, we required everybody to have a bachelor's degree. How important is a bachelor's degree when you're an art director?
Good point.
So we got rid of that. So because we were excluding a lot of talented people who didn't think it was worth getting in going into debt to get a bachelor's
Smart.
degree. They got maybe an associate's degree, maybe they got a technical degree, and they can use the technology and are as good a designer, if not better, than anybody who went to college and wasted 4 years. So we've got to take a look at the criteria of what is the best and make sure that we're excluding things that create barriers for people to enter into our business. You know, like we are looking for somebody in, you know, I remember at the agency, we're looking for somebody to run our social group, you know, our social media group, and that person's got to have 15 years of experience. Well, there isn't anybody. You know, it's a relatively new media. So it's stuff like that that we're used to doing things a certain way, and we don't ever look at those things that we do as habit and say, well, wait a second, maybe we're not getting the right results, the results that we need in order to flourish, because we're putting barriers in the way of talent.
I definitely
Interesting.
agree with that. And I just had this conversation with someone who I sent a job offer to, you know, not a job offer, sorry. It was a job that I thought they would be great for based
Okay.
on what I know their experience to be. And some of the things that they've done. And they said, oh, it says here that they need to have a certain kind of degree. And I was just like, well, first of all, I think you should apply anyway, because you're experienced. And I said, we have to rethink how we
Respect.
look at these things, because me personally, I would choose experience over a degree any day. You know, your visceral experience, and then there's other things as well that are even as important. You know, how you other skills that we have not traditionally looked at that
Right.
actually are as equally important or more so than a degree. And some of that experience you get by being out in the world and doing things and creating and being an entrepreneur or being an
Right,
independent
right.
and creating your business. And I do think we should, those things are important as well and should be given weight when you're hiring.
Well
They
said.
should be
Well
given
said.
weight.
Guys, we said we were going to limit this to an hour. We want to give you, especially you East Coasters, your evening and etc. So let's wind up. Any last things you want to say? Are you optimistic? Are things going in the right direction, notwithstanding the last couple of years maybe going step backwards? Are you hopeful?
I feel positive because when I see young people, they want to work in a diverse atmosphere. They don't want to just be around people that look exactly like them, right? So I am optimistic about the future because they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And they're also not shy about making demands today, no matter how low on the totem pole they are. They're not shy about saying, hey, wait a second, you know, this does not reflect the atmosphere I want to work in, and I'm going to go find a place to work and apply my trade where it is diverse. So I am very hopeful about the future. I think this old
Thank
way
you.
of thinking is kind of dying out.
Hmm.
But again, you got to be intentional and welcoming, and you've got to do it in advance and consistently.
Thank you. Very,
I
very
agree. I agree with
wonderful.
all of that. And I'm just going to add, just because I wanted to hit on these things as far as creating a safe space and the things that support diversity in the workplace, obviously being aware of unconscious bias and finding ways to communicate and have an open space and dialogue. Promoting pay equity, so important, not, nickel and diming your diverse people or marginalizing them in that way. Mentoring, nurturing, that kind of thing is also very important. And just encouraging people to collaborate and get to know each other just on all levels, so that we can be more tolerant and understanding of everyone as a community. It's really important
Beautiful.
and
Thank you.
respectful.
you know, I mean, I agree with everything I've heard, but also just with from the legal perspective of the trends we're seeing in the cases that are being brought, that, you know, I know that there's some reason to be more cautious, but there is still plenty of room, you know, to legally, safely operate and do and continue to do this work. And, you know, that I certainly hope that none of these trends are stopping people. So there's
Right.
still plenty of room to do all the work.
Great, great. You guys are amazing. So grateful that you joined us today, and hope everybody got something out of it. I know I did. And yeah, I'm excited. So we go forward.
Thank you.
Otherwise,
Thank you for
it's a
inviting
wrap.
me to this, and thank you
Thank
for
you.
continuing to have
really.
conversations like this.
So
We need
grateful. Grateful, and
Very
thanks for everybody who
important.
joined
Thank
us.
you.
We're recording this. Anybody wants it? Maybe we'll have AI do a transcript, and otherwise we'll see you around campus.
Bye.
Thanks
Bye,
all.
everybody.
Bye.